Okay, I'm recording the session. Hi guys. Sorry guys, I was on vacation this week, and last 2 weeks have been so crazy busy with work. And my schedule is fully not in control. That's why I couldn't have sessions continuously. But I will try my best to make sure we get at least 4 or 5 sessions this week. All right. So. But I think this break is good. I hope you guys are using this to be able to, in case you miss some videos or, some classes, or in case you miss some topic, I hope you are using this situation to be able to get up to speed on that. All right. So any questions so far? Anybody while trying anything or while preparing anything? Did you guys face any questions or anything that you wanted me to ask, that you wanted to ask? Okay, all right. So today we are going to talk about approval process. Okay. I just want to give you, I just want to start with an example of what an approval process means. Okay. I think, let's assume you go to a bank. Let's say back in India. I don't know how it works here, but let's say back in India, you go to a bank and you want to withdraw some amount using a check. Okay. So what happens if you write the check, you sign it, and you do all that, and you give it to the cashier. If the check amount is, let's say, 50,000 or 60,000, something like that, the cashier would directly give you the amount. But if let's say the check is for an amount of, maybe 2 lakhs or 3 lakhs, something like that. Now what happens? The cashier doesn't have the authority to be able to approve that amount, right? Like if it is within certain amount, the cashier will give you that. But if the amount is more than 2 lakhs or whatever, some kind of threshold limit, the cashier do not have the ability to approve. So basically what the cashier does, the cashier will update some information and send it to probably an assistant manager or manager. Okay. So the manager will also look at the check, will look at your account, then, maybe initialize it by saying approved, or they will initialize it and then send it back to the cashier, and that's when the cashier will actually give it to you. So what's happening here? So initially, as you gave the check to the cashier, if the entry criteria, what is the entry criteria here? If the amount is less than whatever the threshold limit, the cashier will directly give it to you. But if the amount is more than the threshold limit that the cashier can handle or the cashier is entitled to handle, then that the record would be what you call assigned. Basically, the check would be sent to the manager for further approval, and only when that manager approves it, that's when the check processes and they give them. So just one thing, remember here, when you give the check to the cashier, from the time the cashier sends the check to manager and the time it gets back and after the check being processed, the check is locked, right? Locked means nobody's making any changes. You wrote certain amount and you put some date, you sign it. So when the check is during this approval process, nobody's modifying that record, right? Okay. So usually the record, consider the check as a record, and basically the record is logged from editing during that time. Okay. So now let's translate that into few more examples. For example, one example will be probably sorry, I'm just clicking this. So yeah, one other example probably would be credit cards. Let's say you submit a credit card application, you fill a credit card application. You said you wanted this to be the limit and all. So what do? They don't, sometimes if you're talking to a customer care representative, sometimes they will right away what you call approve your application. Sometimes, if you're asking for more, say more amount, then they'll say, maybe let me talk to my manager, and the manager approves it, and only then they would come back and approve it for you. So there are so many use cases that you can think of where approval process is needed. So approval process basically is nothing but, so Salesforce has an inbuilt approval process where you can do some of the things that we spoke about, like, locking a record from editing, and, submitting for a approval process, people approving it, keeping track of who submitted it, who approved it, stuff like that. Okay. So now let's come up with a scenario, maybe an opportunity, maybe an opportunity record. Let's come up with it. Again, this approval process is applicable for, like, you can create it on any object that you want, but let's just take opportunity as an example because there are some common scenarios that we can think of. Let's say when the amount, okay, so when the amount is more than 10,000, I'm just taking a basic example, okay, when the amount is greater than or equal to 10,000 and the stage is negotiation review, okay, and the stage is negotiation review, they can submit, the record should be submitted for an approval process. Okay, user should get an approval. Like, we passed, the company passed in a guideline that, when the stage is negotiation review and the amount is greater than or equal to $10,000, the record should be submitted for approval process. And if it is approved, the stage will automatically become closed one. Okay. If it is not approved, if it is rejected, the stage should become automatically closed lost. Let's take that scenario as an example. So, okay, so let's take the scenario is approval process scenarios. If the amount is greater than 10,000 or equal to 10,000 and the stage is negotiation review, the record should go through an approval process. If it is approved, the record becomes closed one. If it is rejected, the record becomes closed lost. Okay. Let's just come up with that approval process with a scenario. Now, I just want to introduce a concept called queues in Salesforce. Okay, before we tackle the approval process, I just want to introduce a concept called queues. Okay, so I'm just gonna create a queue. So, okay, but opportunity doesn't support the queues itself. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna, introduce the concept of queues. So, queue is nothing but, okay, I'll just show you an example in our regular objects, okay. So, usually what happens is, you see this owner field? This owner field here can either be a user or can be a queue. Okay, so don't think about queue as anything. Queue is a simple concept where you can group users. For example, you see I'm the user and Salesforce automatically by default gave these two users. So now these three users are in a, let's say, I'm just saying case object. Okay. So these three users are in a queue called approval queue. That's it. There is nothing. This approval queue is nothing but it's a group of users. Okay. So some people are assigned together in a queue, and we are calling this as an approval queue. Okay. Queue basically, in cases of like this, so the record can either be owned by an individual user or a queue. What is mean by a record being owned by a queue? A record being owned by a queue is nothing but, like the people who are responsible for this record are these three people. So rather than individually selecting multiple people as owners, Salesforce has given us a feature called queue. Queue is nothing but you can basically add a group of users to that queue. Okay, now, does it have anything to do with an approval process? Yes. But can we use queues on all objects in Salesforce? No. Like standard objects like accounts, contacts, opportunities, these objects does not support queues. Okay. Whereas the object like case or any custom object like employee or the session speaker, all these custom objects that we created, right? Any of those objects will support queues. Okay. There are some standard objects that doesn't support queue. Now, do you have to remember all these that whether a queue is supported by standard objects or whether a queue is supported by custom objects? No. Like when your situation comes, whenever a requirement comes where you need to leverage queues or where you need to assign ownership to a group or assign approval to a group, you can think about a concept called queues, and of course you won't commit anything, right? You test it out, you try it out, and when you're trying it out, if you figure out that the queues are not supported for standard objects like account or opportunity, then you can come up and you will try to come up with another solution. I realized the same way because I had a requirement where I had to assign the ownership of account to a queue, like a group of users, which is nothing but a queue. But that's when I realized Salesforce doesn't support queues for account object. Until then, I was in the impression that queues are supported for every object, but that's when I realized, what? For standard objects, apart from case, queues are not supported. Now, these are some of the standard features. You cannot remember all these features, but when you try it out, you might know. Okay? Queues has nothing. Just remember that there is something like, there is a concept called queues here. Okay. Now, this has something to do with approval process. I'll explain you when the exact situation comes. Okay, while we are dealing with the approval process. Okay. Now let me create a user, just another user record. Just to explain the approval process, I just want to create another user record. So actually, this is an example too. How would you create users in Salesforce? See, right now I have the Salesforce org. If I want somebody else to access this org, I need to create user account, right? Okay, let me just create another user account. I'll just say, I'll just name it as user. I'll use the same email address. Just notice that username can never be unique. Okay, so username have to be always unique across the whole world. Okay, so I'll just say sftrain user is the username. Okay, and I will use Salesforce license. I will give this person also system admin profile for now, like until when we use it. Okay, I created a user account. So what happens, basically, if I go to my Gmail, you'll notice that, I get an email like this. And when I click this verify account, automatically it would ask me to set my password. And that would be the password for this user. So right now, on the same email address, I have two user accounts. One is my regular user account, which I'm logged in right now. Then there is another user account, which I just created. Okay. Let me just enable something. One second. I just want to enable something. I'm just. I thought it used to be in session settings. Cool. I just wanted to see this button, login button. So what this login button means, I can log in as this user. I can impersonate. Salesforce has this feature where I can log in as a different user. So this is actually a very good feature. So what happens in production, right? Let's say I'll tell you why that's a good feature, the login as feature. So when you go to this user, right, you see this login button. So when I click login, why it is kicking me out. Yeah, you see, oh man, it usually doesn't kick out like that, but I don't know why it is kicking me out. But I can log in as other users. There is this feature in Salesforce where we can log in as other users. So what that is, like, let's say there is an end user, okay? There is a user. That user complains that some feature is not working for them. And, when you are trying to look at that feature, it all looks good for you. But when that user is trying to use the same feature, it doesn't work for them. So it becomes hard to debug. So what you do is you can log in as them. Like you can click on their user account and you can see this login button. And when you click on login button, you will be as them. Any work that you do will be done as that user. Okay. So because you are logged in as them, like you will be able to use that feature and you will be able to determine most of the times, right? So when you're building a feature, in a sandbox, you build everything as a system admin. And, because system admin has access to everything, all the things work fine. But when you log in, like from an end user perspective, things might not be working because you might not have enabled some permission, stuff like that. So how do testers test it? Testers create different user accounts with different profiles, and then they use this login feature to be able to log in and test as that end users. Okay, so that's why that login feature is useful. Now, sometimes what happens? Let's say you're working on a feature. The code or any configuration you're working on it. You're doing everything right, but for some reason the feature may not be working fine. Not always we are wrong. Sometimes even Salesforce, the product as a product might have bug. So you will raise a case with Salesforce. Okay, so how would you raise a case with Salesforce? Basically, you can go to here. Like you see, you can go to help and training and you can click get support. So when you click get support, so here, you'll find an option like, with support services, you can just click login and then create a case with them, like saying, hey, I'm trying this feature, but it's not working. And then usually what they ask is, what is your R guide? So if you go to company information, there is something called, you see this Salesforce Organization Id. This is a unique ID through which Salesforce will identify you which instance you have. So, because even on NA85, there are so many instances, right? But this organization ID right here helps Salesforce to exactly identify which instance or which Salesforce org we are. So whenever you create a case with Salesforce with help and training, they will always ask you what is the org ID. So if you go to company information and you need to copy this org ID and provide it to them. Now what Salesforce asks sometime is, okay, I just I want to replicate this issue in your environment. Can you give me access? Like somebody from Salesforce, their support agents will write an email to you asking, hey, we looked at this issue that you asked about. Can you give me access to your environment so I can log in and I can look at it? Okay. So in that case, what we usually do is, okay, so we go to settings. Okay. So here, like when you click on, you see there is an option called settings, and in that settings you see grant account login access, right? You click on grant account login access and you see there is salesforce.com support. So you give 3 days, 1 week, or depending on whatever option that is. So you just usually give 1 week and save. So because I'm giving access to Salesforce support for 1 week, the support agent, like from Salesforce, they will be able to log in as us, because I gave the access to this org, they'll be able to log in as us and try to replicate the issue in our environment. Okay. Now, similar to this, you see, I think when I was working on it, in the setup, like if I went to setup, and in the setup, if you notice, I have enabled in login access policies. I search for login access policies, and in the login access policies, I check this checkbox called administrator can log as any user. Now, let's say if I disable this, lots of companies might not enable this feature, okay? Let's say if I disable this, okay, and if I search for Shravan user, okay, you see, I'm not seeing the login button. So this login access policy here is controlling whether system administrators can log in as other users or not. You see, if the login access policy is not enabled, you see, you're not even seeing the login button here. So you cannot log in as other users. If the login access policy is enabled, and now if you go here and refresh, so I need to refresh this again. Come on. Did I save this? Instead can log in as an user, right? So let me just search for the same user again. Come on, why is it not showing? This is the problem with Lightning. You just have to refresh it too many times. But anyway, I mean, we can say. But the thing is, if I refresh it multiple times, you'll see this button here, this checkbox here, ensures whether you see that login button or not. Now, for example, if you're working in a financial company or a banking company, if this usually their policy, like, because, even as a system admin, you shouldn't be able to log in as other people and, you shouldn't be modifying the records, and because there might be sensitive data. So usually there are a lot of companies which, as a company policy, they wouldn't enable this feature. Okay, because they wouldn't enable this feature, you wouldn't see login button here to log in. Like even as a system admin, you wouldn't be able to log in as other users. But what if a user is complaining that there is an issue and you are unable to replicate, but you want to log in as a user to be able to do that? Okay, so when you have to do that, you will definitely run into that scenario where you need to ask the user to follow the same steps. You need to call the user or write an email to the user and ask the user to go here, click on settings, go to grant account login details. You see here, your company's administrator. There is an option called your company's administrator. Because, see, previously, when the login access policy was enabled, you weren't seeing this your company's administrator option because this login policy will enable administrator to log in as anybody. Because now we have disabled this, it is showing your company's administrator. So you should write the steps to the user. You should write the steps to the user to say, hey, go here, go click on this icon, go to my settings, and in the settings you will see an option called grant account login access. Click on this and enable this for 1 week. Okay, and save. So when you enable this for 1 week and save, you will be able to just log in as that user who have granted access to the company's administrator. Okay, this way you will be just like how Salesforce is able to log in as us and solve our problem. We will be able to log in as one of our end user and try to replicate the issue from their end and try to probably solve that issue. Okay, so that's
Now, one question.
yes.
So Salesforce support guys, how they login, like using whose user ID? We have to share our login
User,
details.
because I gave it, right? Because I gave access to Salesforce.com support. They will impersonate me. So if they are making any changes, it would be reflected as me making changes.
So you will share your credentials with them.
We won't share our credentials. We won't share my username and password. Okay. So
Okay.
because we are giving our org ID, right?
Yeah.
Salesforce might have built some application from their end. Because I have given our org ID and because I am agreeing Salesforce.com support can log in, they don't need my username and password. They just can log in as me.
Okay. These are the only two things which I have to provide. They will do the rest. So nothing
Yeah,
else.
they will take care of the rest. Like, most of 99.99% of the times, whenever you raise a case with Salesforce support, they will ask you to provide this grant account login access. Okay. How to raise a case with Salesforce? Click on this icon and, go to get support. And because this is a dev org, you see options a little bit differently. But if you're actually working for a company, when you click get support, there will be an option called log a case. And there you will enter the information about, what it is and all that stuff. So the current company where I work, we are a private company. So, our policies are not very strict on, whether we can log in as other users and, all that stuff because we are not audited. So in the current company where I work, yeah, we log in as other users. We don't ask every time for users. But the previous company where I used to work, our audit policies are so strong that we do not have this login as feature enabled. So whenever a user complains about some issue, I had a template, like, on the steps to grant login access. So I used to copy paste that email asking them to, click on my settings, go to grant login access and give permission to system admin. So I used to log in as them and be able to, perform the task, whatever I'm supposed to. Okay. See, these things are not hard. It's just that you just need to know once, right? You need to know that there is this feature, there is this Salesforce.com, there is this login access policy, there is this login button. And the problem, right? The problem, even though you're experienced developer, sometimes you might not know this. The reason being, let's say you go join a company where the login access policies are already enabled. And all you do is you just go click login button, log in as one of the user, do your work and come back. But because it's already enabled, you might not even think about, oh, there is a feature called login access policy. We can enable that. We can disable that. You might not even think about it. But only when you're faced with that scenario, that's when you'll actually think about it. Okay. But again, these are easy things to find. You can always, just like, I couldn't remember. I thought it was in session settings. That's why I Googled one and, the documentation clearly said, go to login access policies and you would see there. I just went there and enabled the login access policy. Okay. All right. Now, I think we came to a completely different topic, but it's good. It's a good topic. It's a real life use case that you would use a lot. It's good to know. So now let's come back to our approval process. Okay. So I'll search for approvals. Okay. Approval process. So I want to manage approval process for opportunity because, sorry, not order. I want to manage it for opportunity object. Okay. So for opportunity object, I want to manage approval process. I'll just use Jumpstart Wizard. So there are two things, standard setup wizard and Jumpstart Wizard. Both reach the same purpose. It's just that if you use Jumpstart Wizard, there are some things that are already pre-configured for us. We can always change them, but it's just that they are pre-configured for us. If you use standard setup wizard, we need to configure each and every step. Let's just take the easy part, which is using, okay. So I'll just say, I'll name it as opportunity amount approval. Of course, name is mandatory for everything. You see, add the submit button and I'll tell you what this means. Okay, I'll just tell you what this means. Okay, remember the entry criteria. What was the entry criteria? In the bank example that I gave you, that I asked you, that I told you, the entry criteria is only like, the amount is, because for the cashier to send it to the manager, there has to be an entry criteria. If somebody is asking for 1,000 rupees and 2,000 rupees, if the cashier is sending even those checks to the manager, the work would never get done. So there will be some kind of entry criteria. So here, what is the criteria that we thought about? We thought the amount should be greater than or equal to 10,000 and opportunity stage, like the opportunity stage should be equal to negotiation review. If the opportunity stage is negotiation review and the amount is, I'll just say greater than or equal. Okay, so there is a difference, right? So if the opportunity is greater than or equal to 10,000 and if the opportunity stage is negotiation review, and you see the approver. Who is the approver? A user, like the person who is submitting, can manually choose it, or you can automatically assign it to a user, like you can just choose automatically assign to approver, or we can let user manually choose the approver. It depends. The current place where I work, we use this option a lot, where we allow users to choose the approver manually. Because of some of the complex hierarchy, the places where I worked before, we preferred this option where, we automatically enable a user to be picked up. Let's just go with the manual option for now. Again, there are numerous use cases. It really depends on what your use case depends on the requirement that comes up. Okay, so for now I'm just using let the submitter choose the approver manually and hit save. Okay, I'll just click. So, okay, so here is the whole approval process. The entry criteria is amount greater or equal to 10,000 and opportunity stage name. That's the entry criteria. And then you see this initial submission action. The moment when the record is submitted for approval, the record should be logged from being edited. Okay. Even final approval, like, if it is approved, the record is logged. The approval step is manually chosen. And if the final rejection is, we are unlocking the record. Okay. Let me just activate this. So this is a simple approval process. We just use the Jumpstart Wizard, and automatically what happened, we got the ability to be able to, add the approval process. We will add approval actions and rejection actions in a bit. Once I show you the example, I'm gonna, we will add more actions here. But for now, you see, you just need to know what is the entry criteria. Okay, and you see initial submitters. Okay, look at the initial submitters. We are just saying who can submit this, who can submit the approval process. Okay, we are just choosing it as opportunity owner, but if you have other fields, we can choose it too. Now let's go ahead and test this one. Go to sales I go to opportunity. Let me create an opportunity. And just say 8,000, so not 80. Doesn't matter what we saw. I just say. Okay. Now, if you look at here, the amount is this one stage is perception analysis, and I save, and you can see there is an approval history. Okay. There is a like approval history related list that's already available. Let me just change this amount to 12,000 and stage to be negotiation review. Yeah. Let me just give me, okay, details. So this is 12,000 and the stage is negotiation review. Let me go here, you see, and let me click this submit for approval button. Comments, please approve this. Okay, and let me just click submit. So because you see, when we said we are gonna choose the user manually who is gonna approve, I'm gonna use this Shravan user as the next approver and hit submit. Okay, you see, automatically step 1, the approval request is submitted, and this is assigned to Shravan, and these are the comments. Okay, now, like, you know, also this record is basically locked from being edited. Now the thing is, since I'm a system admin, I'll still be able to make updates, but if I'm not a system admin, they will see, if I'm an end user, they will see a lock symbol here, and this record, they will not be able to edit this record. Okay, now what I can do is, okay, come on. You see here, I can just click on approve or reject. Okay, I'll just click on approve. Like, you know, the moment I click on approve, the record again, you know, I'm just saying, like, we didn't define any approval action, but what I just, like, you know, the person, it is assigned to Shravan user, but I approved it. Because I'm a system admin, I'm able to do all these things. But usually, as an end user, like, you know, as an end user, basically what happens is, whoever you submitted it, like, you know, it is submitted to a user called Shravan user, and that Shravan user will be the person who approves this, you know, who clicks on this approve button, so that the record gets approved. Or you can click even reject button too, like, you know, to make sure the record gets rejected. So this way, I mean, this is basically the concept of approval. The concept of approval is nothing but you have an entry criteria. When the record entry criteria is met, basically, you will allow the user to submit the record for an approval process. Okay. Let me show you the entry criteria importance. Okay. I'll create another record. Test approver 2. I'll just say 9,000. Stage can be something else. Okay, I'll just choose close date and hit save. Now, you see, our approver record entry criteria, amount should be greater than or equal to 10,000, and the stage should be at least negotiation review. Like, you know, that's the entry criteria for us. But here the amount is 9,000 and the stage is, you know, this one. So when, let's say you click submit for approval, type in the comment. You see, no application approval process was found. That's the error that we get because the record is not meeting the entry criteria, right? Because the record is not meeting the entry criteria, it was just throwing an error saying, we don't have an approval process matching it, okay? Whereas I update the same record to $12,000 and change the stage to negotiation review and hit save. So I did this. Now I go hit submit for approval. Hit submit. See, it's asking me who should be the next approver and hit submit. You see, and the opportunity record was submitted for approval. Even I'm getting emails as well because, my email is used for even the other user as well. I created a Shravan user record, right? You see, I'm even getting this request. Shravan has requested the approval for following. When I click this, it automatically takes me to what is the record and whether I can decide to approve or reject. I'll just say reject. Save. The record gets rejected. You see, the rejected. If you go here, and if you notice, if you check the view all, you see the comment is rejected. This record got rejected. Okay. See, we are just approving and rejecting, but we are not taking any action, right? So approval process is way more than that. It's not only about just submitting a record for approval process and approving and rejecting, but we have something called as approval actions. So what are those approval actions? Approval actions are nothing but whenever a record is submitted or whenever somebody approves the record or whenever somebody rejects the record, we can take some actions. We can kick off some business processes. Okay, let's see what those are. Now, what we'll do is if it is approved, we'll automatically change the stage name to, if it is approved, we'll automatically change the stage name to closed one. Okay. If it is rejected, we will automatically change the stage name to closed last. Okay. Let's just make that action. Okay. So let me just go to setup. I'll go to the approval processes. Okay. I go to this approval. Okay. You see on the final approval, okay, in the final approval actions, it's just like, just like process builder. When we do a process builder, we performed a field update, right? In the same way, in the final approval action, I'm going to do a field update. Okay, I'm just going to do a field update. I'll just say update stage to closed one. Okay, I want to update stage name and the value should be closed one. Okay. See, I added final approval action. I added an action called update stage to closed one. Once the record is updated, the stage name should automatically be updated to closed one. Final rejection action. What should happen if it is rejected? Okay. So I will write another field update. Update stage to close one, right? In the same way, I'll write a field update called update stage to close last. Okay. The stage is, and then I'll just choose close last. So here is where I went. Final rejection action. I chose field update, and in the field update, this is the field update that I have. Update stage to close last, opportunity, and the pick list. I'm updating it to close last. Okay. So if I go back to the approval process, this is the whole thing now. So this is the entry criteria, who are the initial submitters, and then when it is submitted, the record automatically gets logged from being edited. When it is final approval action, we are performing a field update to closed one. When it's final rejection action, we are updating the stage name to closed last. Okay. Now, you see the approval process seems, it seems very simple here, but we can do lots. We can do complex approvals as well. Like, when this and this conditions happen, move to next step. When these and these conditions happen, approve it. When, so and so conditions are met. Like, in real scenarios, there will be so many things, right? If the stage is negotiation review, but the amount is 90,000, and if the first step approval happens, approve it. But if the amount is 250,000, okay, sometimes think about a scenario like this. There is cashier. The cashier has the ability to approve, like, give you the cash up to probably 50,000 rupees. But if the amount is more than that, the cashier will send the record to assistant manager. The assistant manager might have the ability to approve for 2 lakhs, but somebody requests like 5 lakhs in a check. So then what happens? Even the assistant manager should send that request to the manager for approval. Like, there are different use cases for different scenarios. So you need a little bit more dynamic approval process where, if the amount is greater than 10,000 but less than 100,000, just, we need one approval process. Like, but if the amount is, more than that 200,000 or whatever it is, we need another approval process called final approval by some other user. Okay. But the problem is in here, I cannot demonstrate you that because Salesforce only gives us 2 licenses. So I can only create 2 users. But still, you can use the same user account to be able to do that as well. And I want you guys to do that as an exercise. Okay. So one of the exercise that I want you guys to do is to build a dynamic approval process where same scenario. If the stage name is negotiation review and the amount is greater than 10,000 but less than 100,000, assign it to one user. In the same, if the amount is greater than 200,000, it should go through 2 approval process. One to the initial user, and then again, to the who, like, for now, in your dev instance, you can use the same user as twice, but just make sure it follows 2 approval processes, 2 approval steps. If it is less amount, just only 1 approval step. If it is more amount, make sure in 2 approvals, use the same user. Just like I use Shravan user as the user, use the same user in 2 approval steps, but make sure your record goes through 2 approval steps. Whereas if the amount is, less than 100,000 but greater than 10,000, make sure it goes through only 1 approval process. Okay. That way that would be a good exercise to be able to know all the features what the approval process can have for. Now, okay, remember, I just want to show you just one test for approval action. Remember, we wrote a field update, right? We wrote a field update that says if the amount is this one and if it is negotiation review, save. Okay. So we said if it is approved, like, now let's submit it for approval. For Shravan user. Now it is submitted. Remember what we wrote? If it is, I got an email that it is, now if it is, we can also approve by responding to the email. Like, we need to enable some settings, but if we enable those settings, if the user responds to the email by saying approve, the record gets approved automatically. Even that feature is there. Okay. So now if this step is approved, okay. If this step is, this is step 1, right? Here. So if this step is approved, remember what we thought? The final approval action should be, the stage name should be updated to closed one, right? So let me click this one and just say approve. Approve. I will go back to the opportunity and you automatically see the stage name is closed one. See, the approval process automatically changed the stage name to closed one. Okay, because, we mark this step as approved. Okay. So in the same way, let me clone this opportunity actually. put the stage as negotiation review. I'll rename it as option. Sorry. I'll create a brand new test for rejection action. I'll put a close date till negotiation review. Amount is, I'll put some amount and save. Okay. Now, what happens? You can choose submit for approval. I'll just submit without a comment. I'll choose the next user and I'll submit. Okay. Now, the approval request came through. In the first step, the person rejects it. Okay. The record is rejected. And if you now go look at this, you see the details. The opportunity is closed last. Okay. So which set it, because the approval process. Okay. Let me take you to the approval process here. Come on. Just take. You see here, because in the final approval action, I made a field update. I added a field update to make it to closed one. In the final rejection action, I added a field update to mark the stage name as closed last. And that's what is acting up, and that's how the stage name is automatically set to either closed one or closed last by the approval process automatically. Okay. Any questions in this approval process? Again, the end goal is not to know, or there are numerous scenarios possible. The end goal for me is not to teach you how many scenarios are possible or whatever we can do. The end goal of this session is to introduce you that there is a concept called approval process in Salesforce that you can use to be able to, submit records for approval process based on certain criteria. And, in the same time, to introduce you a concept called, there is approval action, rejection action. It's not only just approve and rejecting a record, but at the same time, you have a related list where you can track everything, and you have something called approval actions where, you can make field updates as well. Not only field updates, you can send emails, So this is here, this looks exactly like process builder, right? In the process builder, you have these actions, right? Like either you can send an email alert, or you can perform a field update, or you can create a task. So you can do those business processes whenever a record is approved or rejected. Okay. Now, there is also something called entry criteria where, which process defines the entry criteria. So the goal is not to cover everything that comes with approval process, or not to solve all the scenarios that come with approval process, but the goal is to let you know that, when the scenario comes up, in Salesforce, there is a process like approval process, and some of the debugging steps, like, if there is an existing approval process, but if it's not working, I want you guys to go look at where the approval process is. Okay. And always don't forget, people always create the approval process, but you see there is an active button here. We need to activate this approval process. Okay. Now, recently I've been working on approval process a lot in the current place where I'm working. Some of the things, some of the practical things that I learned, or some of the lessons that I learned after working a lot with approval processes. See, once the approval process is activated, right, you cannot modify a lot of things. Okay. So once the approval process is activated, and there are some records that use this approval process, you cannot modify a lot of things. Okay. If you have to modify anything, you need to clone it and deactivate the existing, you need to deactivate this, clone this approval process, and create another version of approval process with whatever steps or whatever changes that you want. So like in test environment, you can do whatever you want, but before the approval process goes into production, make sure you got it right. Like, make sure you test, retest, and ensure that all the things that you wanted in the approval process are covered. Okay. Now, that's one of the biggest lesson. I mean, yeah, I would say, we got it right. I definitely got it right for when I deployed the approval process into production, but our users changed their mind. It was a 7-step approval process that I built for them, but they changed their mind after it went live. They wanted something, a different way on how they want to do things, because there are already, because that approval process is in production, there are already certain records that are submitted for approval process, and that was using that. So now I had to come up with a brand new approval process and just inactivate the existing one. I cannot just go ahead and modify the existing one. Okay. So that's one thing, like you need to deactivate it and recreate a new one. Now, one other thing is, you see, we are defining the final approval action, final rejection action, right? Let's say, whenever you are creating such new approval process and there are records already exist in production, you need to give a thought about, okay, what happens to the existing records? How do I handle those existing records? You need to think about those things before taking any action. Like, just creating a new approval process doesn't mean your job is done. Create a new approval process, but at the same time, do some analysis about what happens to the existing records that are in the old approval process when they get up. Like, again, the way you handle differs totally scenario by scenario, but make sure you think about it. So the different, like, we have some interns that we hired in our company. Okay. So those interns basically, I don't know why my company does that. Whenever they hire interns, they always assign them to me. Now, the thing that I noticed with them, right, they're so good. They just come out of college. They don't know a single line about Salesforce, but they're practically, they've done their bachelor's in computer science, and they come to, the current intern that I'm working, he didn't even finish his bachelor's. He's in his, I think we call third year, and they call some semester, whatever it is. So he still have 1 year to go back to college. So he's just a computer science graduate. Okay. He came like 3 weeks ago. Man, these people are so good. They make me feel like I'm from a different generation. I'm 30 years old right now. Okay, they're 20 years, and they really make me feel like I am a different generation, and they like I don't belong to the current generation, because those people are so fast. Like they haven't seen Salesforce. That guy haven't seen Salesforce at all. He doesn't even know that there is a technology called Salesforce exists. He came to the company. I gave him a little introduction, and I taught him few things like, hey, this is we call it object. We call this a table, and very, very basic information. I just sat with him for 1 hour and gave him very basic information. And I think within like last 15 days, he has built me around 3 lightning components. He have written 3-4 triggers. He have performed lots. I'm so amazed the way how they catch all those things. But one thing, they do great stuff. They're so fast. They do great stuff. They're fearless, all that. But one thing I noticed with them, not only I've worked with interns even before too. One thing I noticed with the interns versus an experienced developer is the experienced developers might take some time. They might act a little bit lazy. But one thing they get right is they think in all directions. That means the difference is, if the requirement that I talked about, right? Hey, there is already a current approval process in production, and the users are asking to change that approval process. This is the requirement. So what does an intern do versus what does an experienced developer do? The intern, will look at the new requirement, come up with a quick new approval process, activate it, deactivate the old approval process, get everything right, and deploy. Great. Now, what does an experienced developer do? Experienced developer also does all the same things, but even before developing, the experienced developer will think about, okay, I'm going to build this new approval process, but there are some existing records in the system that are using the old approval process. What do I do about them? Let me go back to the business and ask him, hey, what do we do about them? Or is there any way I can, make my approval process, the new approval process and the workflow field update steps in such a way that even after I go live with the new one, the old records still work? Or, can I write a script and automatically reject all the, when I go live with the new one, or can I automatically reject the old one and resubmit it automatically so that they all follow the new approach process? So we think about these scenarios, we discuss about it, come up with an approach and make sure we follow that so that the business is not disrupted when we go live with the new approval process. Okay. So that is the pace of the new developers is so high. They do things very pretty nice, but with experience, you get few things like, hey, how does it impact business? Can this be deployed? Should we take care of anything? Are we thinking all scenarios? Okay. So that is, I think with experience, I won't say it's experience too. I think it's just that the sense of thought that we need to have, like, I would say not common sense, but more, in IT, it works like that. You need to really think about all the angles before you commit to anything. Okay. I don't know. I'm not even finding the right word, but yeah, I've been working with interns for like last 3 years. They're so good. They don't know that Salesforce as a technology exists. Few people have heard about it. They never work on it, but they catch the technology like within 2 to 3 days, and they do crazy things in like very quickly. They do very crazy things. You ask them whatever you want, they're just gonna read the documentation, come back, and just they'll say I'm done with it, and I'll be so amazed with the quality of things that they do. But the only problem that I see is, or the only differentiation point between them versus experienced developer is only this. The experienced developers, of course, the name itself is experienced. They come with that experience. So they have seen things before. So they will take care of the surrounding things as well. Like, where do I develop? How do I communicate to business? Some of the other things, non-technical aspects. Okay. Whereas a non-experienced developer do that. So that's why I want you guys to, I think there is a saying, I don't know, I've heard it in an interview. I think they say the Hollywood movies, right? So they say the script work, right? When they finish the script, they consider 90% of the movie is done. The shooting part is actually 10% of the work. If they benchmark it, if they divide it by percentage, if the whole bound script is 90% of the work, and the 10% of the work is actually executing the script by shooting the scenes. Now, the 10 for us, for an outsider, the 10% seems like a big thing, but actually for them, like people who are from the industry, they feel like the 10% is the easiest piece, but getting the script right is the 90% of thing. Even, I used to be the person, when I was not a lead, when I was not a solution architect, my concern was always like, oh, how do I write the code? How do I get this functionality working? Now that I'm working as a lead or as an architect, and, I have people who, I have developers who I assign work to them. My thought, like what I've noticed from the junior developers or the developers is, they tend to, like, whenever there is a requirement, there is sense of care or whatever, and people are like, go and start writing the code or start implementing things or start doing things rather than understanding the whole picture. But I think one good thing will be to, whenever you get some requirement, take a step back, take a moment, understand the whole thing. Okay, what do we have right now? What are they expecting? That means, what is the current scenario? Where do we want to get after the scenario is implemented? So you need to do those things. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry guys. Yeah, I just so take a step back. Don't worry about the code. Don't worry about the requirements. Nothing. Just worry about okay, from point A where we are at right now, from point B, what are all the steps that need to be done to complete the whole requirement as a whole? Okay, and then like plan it. What are all the steps, and then achieve step after step. That way, you'll do things more completely and you'll focus on important things. Okay, rather than just worrying about code or implementing. You see, these things, when you're learning this approval process, workflow, process builder, these things might seem complicated, but once you, like when there is a specific requirement or once you know it, there is no second way or second thought about it. But the things that cannot be taught are the things that cannot be learned from documentation, or the things that I'm only telling, but I cannot give you that experience of thinking comprehensively, making note of those steps, and taking responsibility. One last thing I want to tell and conclude. I know these are not technical, but I feel these are really important. One thing I noticed, especially in IT, is let's say you have a project manager or you have a manager. Okay, let's say you have a manager and there are 5 developers that are working for that manager. Now, how would a manager go home and sleep happily? Okay, so if all the 5 developers or the 5 people who are reporting to the manager are really responsible, the manager will go home and sleep happily. The reason being, the manager's boss or their bosses will never come to the developer and ask, hey, why something is not delivered, why something is not completed. They will always ask the manager, hey, what happened? Why is your team not delivering? Then it's up to the manager to fire, hire, or do anything with the developers that are working. So the higher management or the sponsors will never come to the developers and ask why something is not being delivered or why something is not done. They will always ask the managers. Now, let's say among the developers, let's say everybody is good, like the responsible people, like all the developers are so good that when there is a task that is assigned, they assume the ownership, they take care of it, they speak with the people, they get all the requirements, they make sure everything is deployed correctly, like they do everything right from scratch to end. Now when all the 5 developers are like that, would the manager will ever have to worry about? No, the manager will never have to worry about anything, because almost all the work is being done synchronously in an automated fashion. So the manager doesn't have to worry about it. Whereas, let's say the developers are like, not assuming the responsibility. They are still relying on the manager to direct them, hey, do this, finish this, then go to this step and finish this. Like the manager is instructing them each and every step. So would the managers go home and sleep happy? No. The person would be always thinking about, oh, tomorrow I need to talk to this person. Day after tomorrow, like I have to schedule a meeting with them. So they will always be in a constant mode of thinking. Now, let's say there will be a time comes where the CIO of the company will come and say, hey, you know what? We have some budget cuts. We need to let go of, among the 5 people, we need to let go of 1 person or two people. So what would the manager do? On what criteria the manager would make a decision? The answer is definitely not the talent. Okay, the answer is definitely not the person who can write great code or the person who can configure great things. No, that's definitely not the answer. The answer is manager will let go of the people who don't assume responsibility themselves. Okay, so people who assume responsibility, like when a task is given to them or when some requirement or when some functionality is expected of them, if they are taking responsibility from scratch and if they are doing everything, like doing everything means not technically, but speaking to the business analyst who gave the requirement, making sure they got all the things right. Like, and making sure they are moved to a separate environment for testing. Speaking with the testing team as well to ensure, hey, if the testing is done, do you guys have any issues or things like that? And ensuring that it is deployed correctly, set it in the right place. And also thinking about scenarios like, hey, like the other scenarios, right? The comprehensive scenarios, like what happens to existing records? Will it introduce any regression? Like these are non-technical things, but if the person is assuming this responsibility, then they will be the people who will be like the manager will go even beyond their powers to say, you know what, we need this person. We need this person in our in my team. Otherwise, my team cannot function. They will fight for you. They will fight to get the budget for you. Okay. If you're not responsible, if you're just though you might be a great coder, but you're not taking full responsibility of the task, and you're just doing whatever asked or things like that, you might survive, but you will not survive in hard times. Okay, so in order to survive in hard times, I guess I want you guys to be like, from the beginning, when you join the company, assume this responsibility, take those things, and ensure, like, sometimes things will be like, oh, it's not my responsibility. Rather than doing that, try to go that one extra step more to ensure, like, even though some of the things are not in your hand, just ensure that those things are covered. That way you are more valued in the company, and, managers will fight for you. Okay. I mean, for few people it comes naturally. Few people you have to teach them. But, I'm not sure if you guys worked before or if this is going to be your first job, but I'm just ensuring that from day one, make sure you are that person who takes more responsibility. More responsibility doesn't mean taking more work, but within whatever your work is, whatever tickets that are assigned to, whatever project that you are assigned to, ensure you're thinking comprehensively. Ask good questions. When you're thinking comprehensively, automatically when you're in meetings, you will be asking the right questions. When you're asking the right questions, you make impression. Oh, this person is really thinking. This person asks the right questions. This person challenges us in the right manner. And hence, automatically you will stay in the company more. You will get more hikes. Those are the things that reflect. Nobody, the CIOs or the managers, will never come and look at your code and, oh, did you solve the logic in 3 lines versus this person solved the logic in 15 lines? Nobody does that. At least in my experience, nobody did that. And nobody gave the salary hikes depending on the efficient code that you have written or not. Of course, it's always good to do that, but people are always recognized or treated by the type of communication that they do, by the type of responsibility that they assume in the project. Okay, and I just want you guys to be those people. Okay, I'm just speaking out of my frustration today. Okay, all right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And again, I'll see you guys tomorrow at the same time. We will talk about record types and page layouts. Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir,
yeah.
Still, like, how many weeks is this training for? Like, when we'll be completing this training?
Admin, I think I have record types, page layouts, profiles, permission sets, record level sharing, and so 7 more sessions for admin part to be completed, and probably around 10 more sessions for development.
Okay, so maybe by end of March?
Yeah, but probably around around 15 more sessions. But the thing is, after the admin piece is done, after 5 more sessions, if you are in, like, if you want to do certifications, you can do Platform Developer 1 and App Builder certification. And if you are in the market, you can start marketing your resume. Let me just stop the recording for a second.
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah, you can